Thank you, Devon Harris, for being with me today. You are my first official guest on this new show that I have.
Oh, wow. I am honored. Thank you for having me.
Of
Yeah. Number
course.
one, baby.
It's my first time speaking with a three-time Olympian, a motivational speaker, and an author. I actually don't know. I have your children's book.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
It's Yes, I Can, the story of the Jamaican bobsled team. It is the
And,
cutest. And
and
also, your other book, Keep On
oh,
Pushing.
yeah,
I
you've been getting around, haven't you?
I do my homework. Hot lessons from Cool Runnings. So, if people don't know, if they've been living under a rock, your personal story was what the movie Cool Runnings was loosely based on, and your story of perseverance and dreaming big and going for it and making things happen.
And they were part of my personal story. Yeah. The part that has to do with me being on the very first Jamaican bobsled team. And I thought Hollywood did a good job in depicting the spirit of the team. People who have watched the movie have obviously enjoyed it. It's entertaining. It's a comedy, but hey, it's loosely based on the true story. So there are, several quote unquote facts
Right.
that didn't take place. But definitely it's one of those stories of perseverance, believing in yourself and, not allowing the world to tell you what it is you can or cannot do.
Absolutely. And that is my core of what I want to talk to. I always look back at this picture. So this was me when I was 8 years old, right?
Oh, there's a
And I
cutie.
thank you. Around this time is when that movie came out, and regardless of any details, that story is one of many stories of just perseverance of the human spirit. Of we see it a lot in sports, and that movie had me and my friends in the neighborhood making sleds and going down the street. I mean, really, all of us. So to latch onto those stories and to having positivity and dreaming for kids, I think today is so important. And that's what I really want to touch on. I know
Mhm.
that you are passionate about working with kids. You speak at schools. You have a program called School Runnings, which I think is really great. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, so when I just started speaking, I would find a school in a rough part of town or a children's hospital, actually, to go visit. And I don't get to do that as often as I used to and I would like to these days. I happen to be busier for some reason. Um, but I'm one of those people who believe the term, the children are the future is not just a cliche, it's a fundamental truth. And so I'm always, if there's one thing we all have in common is the fact that we're kids at one
Yes.
point in our lives. Um, and so you think about, hey, what kind of messages would you have wanted to hear as a child growing up, now that you're older, looking back? And so when I was, the thing that inspired me to write Yes, I Can, I would be speaking to these kids and I find that, generally speaking, they lack, self-confidence, they lack belief in themselves. And I started kind of scoring my mind, what cool story can I tell them to inspire them? And then I thought of, the story of the Jamaica bobsled team. And then it's like, how can I tell that story in a way that would engage them?
Mhm.
And hence the way it's written, to verse. But I think it's really important to, reach out to kids and connect with them. They're at that such an impressionable age
Yes.
of development. Just one story, one idea can make a huge difference in their lives.
Absolutely. And I was going to ask you when the seed was planted in you, but at the beginning of this book, actually, you said it was your grandmother who kind of planted that seed for
You,
you. How did she do that?
you can blame her. It's her fault. Yeah. Um, so I
Did
love
she do
that
it
one
with
to death.
words or stories or?
My grandmother was, so I spent my early years with her until I think maybe I was 5 years old. And my grandmother lived in the country, very, um, you know, average, ordinary kind of country folk, not, super educated traditionally and so on. But she was an amazing storyteller. And she lit up my little 5-year-old mind with all these wonderful stories. But the ones I seem to remember are the ones she told me about soldiers. And there's incredible feat they could perform and not get hurt. And, it sounded so impossible. I didn't know if I could do it, but I wanted to do it. That's the thing that inspired me to want to become a soldier. But more importantly, it really inspired me to want to do things that other people thought was difficult or impossible. And so I'm, because of her influence, I find myself pushing myself beyond, what other people would think is, normal.
Right. In the first chapter of this book, called Enlarge Your Vision of What's Possible, you write, observe children at play or daydreaming. They all imagine themselves as something great, a superhero, a famous actor, a stellar athlete. I've never seen a child at play pretending to be an average Joe. I suspect that children have always been this way. Unfortunately, after they grew out of the Superman cape, many of these kids allow themselves to be saddled by the very limited view of what is possible in their lives, and never adjusted their self-imposed limitations even into adulthood. And I feel that we all suffer with that. So in my mind, my goal is, instead of, it's easier to positively program a child than it is to reprogram an adult. Just like you said, it's not just a cliche saying that children are the future. We got to do this now. And there's so many amazing people, institutions that are doing really great work to work with children and inspire them. But I say, just let's turn it up.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. It's because this is a time. I mean, if we want to create a better world, I remember years ago having a conversation with one of my friends about the old neighborhood. He's from that neighborhood as well. And I said to him, I think my generation is lost. Our generation is lost, I've said to him. But the younger kids that are coming up are the ones that I think I can really have an impact on. And he didn't quite agree with me, still felt like, our generation was salvageable. And I think there are some people, among my age group who you can still help for the most part.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest impact in terms of, changing the trajectory of a community, of a country, of the world, begins with the kids. Getting them to see beyond beyond reality, the reality that people, the adults in the room will paint for us. I think the reality is what we deem it to be, how much we can imagine a future that is better than now. And as the excerpt you just read, kids, when they imagine, when they dream, they're thinking of big, audacious events and goals and experiences, not the average little
limitless. They're
stuff.
Limitless. There's been no
exactly.
limit yet.
And so all of us need to figure a way to kind of connect with that inner child throughout our lives.
Absolutely. And so you have children yourself, right?
Yes, I have 5 children myself.
And how did you instill that in them? Was it through, stories like your grandmother told you? Was it affirmations? Were they like, in a house where there was Post-its, like, you can do it, you can be it? Or
it's kind of funny because I tell a story all the time of my oldest daughter. I remember I don't remember what the circumstance was, and I was trying to encourage her, and she was going, "Don't motivate me now, don't motivate me now." Like, what do you do, But it's through the power of story and example. I think the most powerful way to really inspire anyone, kids especially, those that are close to you, around you, like your children, is to be an example to them. And so my children know that, when I say, hey, you need to work hard, you need to get up and do your homework, they see me getting up and doing what I need to do. So I don't accept those kinds of excuses. And then kids who are not closer to you are close to you. Yeah, you definitely have to rely on the story. And also the power of your example, because you can always point to things that you have done, but also, just as importantly, and it's something that I think about with my kids, not just things that I've done, but things that I'm doing or working towards accomplishing.
Right. And in today's world, I'm so grateful that mental health is a conversation that's happening, and we see anxiety and depression with all of us. And it's, I don't know if it's perhaps more prevalent, and we're seeing that in the numbers in younger kids. Talk to me about what's your opinion on, positive mental attitude, affirmations, visualization, these things to really keep you mentally healthy. I know for me personally, it saved my life.
Mm-hmm. No, really important. The thoughts that we, say to ourselves, they say thoughts are things, and it is absolutely true. The things that you think about most of the time, somehow you end up living, you create, you bring into your life, right? And so when you, especially as kids, you start adopting these kind of negative vibrations that are out there and the negative imagery, and you keep repeating them to yourself, that you find yourself heading down that rabbit hole. I tell a story of when I was 13 years old. In the summer I woke up, and all the boys that lived on my street, my lane we call it, I said to them, hey, we're not friends anymore. And it's it's because they were, look, we're from a poor neighborhood, was it really impoverished, and they took to calling themselves sufferers. And that 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 it had such a debilitating uh, feeling to me. It was like, if I'm a sufferer and if I embrace this word, it means that I am doomed to
Right.
remain in this spot. And so I had to, kind of remove myself from them and that conversation. And that's what I encourage young people to do as well, to find a way, even in the challenging environments in which you find yourself, to carve out a little space for yourself, to think about your own dreams and your own goals, and then go work towards them, and refuse to accept any notion that none of that is possible for you.
Wow, at 13, that's pretty wise for a young one. I mean, and
I,
I was going to say, I get what you're saying, because you might not have even understood the, excuse me, the impact, but the power of words. You knew it didn't physically feel right in your body. And I know that I believe exactly what you're saying. I believe it's the truth. The thoughts we think and the images we hold in our head, they permeate every cell in our body, every fiber of our being. We're sewing it into the fabric of what we're going to be. So why in the heck would we choose if we had a choice? Because sometimes, unfortunately, we're born in circumstances or things happen
mhm.
to us that we can't control. But what we can control, let's control it to the good.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I mean, and I didn't have words for any of this stuff. I just knew it, as I said, it didn't feel right. It just felt so burdensome, and it felt so hopeless.
Yes.
And I was like, I can't, because then I'm growing up in an environment that I didn't particularly enjoy, and was working hard in school and wanted to escape this. And yes, that word sufferer just felt like a roadblock, like a wall in front of me, and I just had to, yeah, divorce myself from that thinking.
Would you say that was a pivotal moment? I know there's certain ages. For me, it was around 7 or 8, and then like 11 and 12, and then again at 18. Would you say that was kind of a pivotal?
That's definitely one of them, because it's, you're at a very, as a teenager, you're at a very impressionable age as well, and a lot of times the attitudes that you start to develop and hold dear at that age really stay with you for a really long time. At that age, I'm like, I separated myself, and I just found myself going on a very different path. 2 years later, I started running track and training seriously, and that put me on a path to where we are now.
Yeah, I would say through physical sports and activity. I think that through activity in general, play, moving your body, kids really, the whole connection between the physical body and the psychology, your physiology changes with, it changes your psychology. I think, people like Tony Robbins, like change state, move your body.
Mhm.
It snaps you right out of that inertia and all of those things. So I think sports is a wonderful way for kids to stay disciplined and get on the right track and stay on a good.
Absolutely. It's one, it's fun, and who doesn't like to have fun? Kids like to play. I loved to play perhaps too much. So sports was always my go-to. But there was so much more about it. The thing about sports is, regardless of um, the environment in which you find yourself. I was just having this very conversation yesterday. You may be a poor kid, an illegal immigrant, as a kid, the guy I was speaking to yesterday, an Olympian. When you go on the sports field, none of that matters. All that matters is what's inside of you, what you can bring out from yourself and put on, and that helps to develop you, and you come to realize, man, if I can do this on the sports field, I can do this elsewhere. And then once, especially if you decide to get serious about pursuing a particular sport, the way you throw yourself into that, the discipline and the determination and the persistence and the consistency with which you have to work, it teaches you so many valuable lessons. But it also, just like those negative words, gets down into your DNA.
Mm-hmm.
And you're then able to move on beyond that to go, okay, this is what I did in sports. Let me figure out how I can apply it to this other area of my life.
Right. Another thing that stood out from your book, you wrote, to think that the greatest businesses around the world find value in what a barefoot boy from Kingston Ghetto has to say, or that I may be able to inspire a poor child who has some big dreams of her own, is humbling, exhilarating, gratifying. It is a huge responsibility, and I take it seriously. Being the man you are today, speaking, motivating, having you have your own channel, you keep on pushing TV, you're active on social media. People look to you as somebody who has overcome, and the fact that you do have a heart for the youth and the children, because I think, like you said, it speaks to us. We were that, those were our roots, that's where our foundation was to do anything. Just reading that, taking you back to that boy, how do you think, or what were the main struggles, and what tools did you use, your mental tools? Like, if you could grab onto one, like it was visualization, that's what got me through it. Affirmation, that's what got me through it.
Mm-hmm. It's wow, I kind of forgot that I wrote that.
It's anybody who's listening, this book, I mean, if you ever need to push any chapter, flip it up to a random page. It's like, I can rule the world right now.
Yeah, it's in the book. That means I wrote it because I wrote it myself. I didn't use a ghostwriter. But yeah, it's, to kind of go back to that, what you just read about this little boy. When I was that little boy, there's no way I could have imagined even this conversation and where I am at now. But what was it that kind of got me there? One is determination, man. I'm unwilling to do without that which I don't have but want. Yeah. So I'm willing to put the work in, and I'm willing to, sweat and, suffer, so to speak, to get it done. So yeah, I was determined. I visualized, and I used visualization before I knew the word. Mm-hmm. And it kind of started, perhaps with my grandmother on the story she told me, and so I had this image in my mind from I was maybe 5 years old of being in the army. And then when I grew old and I became a teenager and I realized you could enlist as an officer, that was the image that was in my mind. And I kept visualizing that, and it required obviously work. And so I want people to understand that you don't just sit home on the sofa and visualize and expect things to come to you. You better get up off your and do some work. And it requires, that persistent effort, because it's a pretty steep learning curve, and with some setbacks and so on. And so the persistence, the discipline, I just define discipline as keeping the commitments that you make to yourself. So recognizing that, hey, I have to get up and I have to do this even though I don't like doing it. And then sometimes it's a lonely road depending on where you are starting from. But it's okay to travel that lonely road because in the end it's going to pay off. And so when I speak, I know I'm not just, it's in a book, but it's a book I wrote. I'm not sharing ideas that I read in a book, but right, that I've lived.
So if you were to give parents, teachers, people who are in position of mentoring youth, what would you say are things that they could inspire them or tell them instead of, I mean, I know parents want to protect and teach lessons, and it can come across like, you know, grumpy old people just trying to tell me what to do. And kids really
Mm-hmm.
resist that. I think that kids need cheerleaders. They need champions. They need, you can do it. It just takes one small seed of like one teacher giving them a wink and like, you got this.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. So I think first is for the parent, the teacher to kind of get an understanding of what it is that the child wants to do or likes doing, you know, where their strengths are, and then encouraging that. I think it's really important to encourage. I was, again, speaking to another Olympian about a coach, and, you know, there are some coaches who like tear you down and belittle you. And I think a coach is one who should be teaching and building and developing. And I think it's really important that as parents, as teachers, parents especially, can be really rough and use really unkind words to their kids. They don't forget those things. And some of them, unfortunately, kind of bury it in their soul.
It's the
And
fibers that gets in their, it gets in their skin.
yes. So use kind words, encourage them, but hey, do not baby them. You have to challenge them, man. I mean, we live in this in this world where you know, Johnny gets a star for every little thing and a trophy. Ugh, I, I, I get it. So years ago, I was in a cab on my way to a speaking engagement, I think, and myself and the cab driver are solving the problems of the world. And he says, you know, the problem is today children are, and I say wimps, as he said wimps, right?
Yeah.
And then to fast forward, I'm at my daughter's volleyball game, and I'm sitting in the stand with my younger daughter, and I'm commenting on, you know, how I see the coach talking to them. I'm like, come on, challenge them. And my youngest daughter's like, no, she has to say they did a good job. And I'm like, but that was not a good job. You know, and that's a challenge. We have to find the fine line, the balance between not belittling
Right.
and at the same time not pretending that what they did was so wonderful.
Right. She could say, you could do better. I mean, that's not
Yeah,
saying you sucked, and it's not
yeah.
saying, you know, you can never do it. It's saying you have the potential to do better. The whole cheering them on. And I think you touched on such an important topic. I know a lot of kids who are doing school from home, and the parents are like, they're not engaging. They're not even logging on. They don't want to do their schoolwork. I can't force them. What am I going to do? And I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, find out what motivates them and then nurture that and then speak to that, because
Challenge them. Don't go, okay, Johnny, good job. When, you know, because then Johnny is learning the really wrong lessons, you know, or Mary is learning the really wrong lessons. And so sometimes it's like, hey, I know you like, let's say, video games. You know, if you get your work done by certain time, then you get to play even more video games, that kind of thing. You have to find, again, it requires effort. Requires you being thoughtful and creative.
it takes work.
Find the balance. Everything. That's the thing, though. Everything takes work, man. Every single thing takes work. You know. Welcome to life.
I know. It's hard. I see it,
Yeah.
and I don't envy the day when I'm challenged with that.
Look, I absolutely love being a parent. Of all the things that I'm called, I love the sound of daddy the most. But I also realize that, yeah, it's a solemn responsibility I have, and I am challenged with, hey, just the resistance that my kids might be giving me just because that's who they are as a person, in addition to the things that they're picking up from the environment. Like, you know, my daughter going, no, don't say it's bad, say, you know, tell them it's a good job. And me, you know, trying to educate her, show her that, hey, it's quite okay not to overpraise when they don't do well.
Right.
But to challenge, because if you don't challenge your kids, they don't grow.
Right. And it's okay to fail. And I think that in this kid's book, the one that you wrote, that is your story, you know, you really wrote it
Yeah.
about how you guys were laughed at, and then you went through it, and you went through the hard work and the blood and the sweat and the tears, and then you didn't win the gold, and you still had your head up high. And God, there's so many fun little, I mean, you could just make any little quotes and put it on the wall for any of these. One of them was, so when your way seems as dark as midnight, don't you give in, put up a fight, believe in yourself like the invincible man, hold your chin up and say, yes, I can.
Indeed, yes, I can. And that's that's, the crux of the message that I try to teach my kids as well. I obviously they'll fail at something, and I'm like, it's okay. Did you work hard? Did you try hard? Okay, good. If you did your best, that's all you could do in this moment. So now let's figure out what you need to correct so you can get better results later on, right? And it's for people who push themselves hard, and I like to talk about keep on pushing it. We sometimes get in the habit of beating ourselves up because we didn't achieve the results that we want. And we have to learn to be kind to ourselves as well. I think if you learn to be kind to yourself, you can be kind to others, and have empathy for when they failed, regardless of how old they are, and have the ability then to help guide them.
And in my personal life, any goal or big thing that I went for, it's not about the goal, it's about who you become and kind of getting there. It's what you learn, what you went through, all the memories, all the ups and the downs and the wins and the losses, the micro wins and losses, all the way through to that. So winning the champion or winning the thing, it's not what it's about. It's who you become. But also winning is great. You always set your mind to win. I don't mean to say,
Yeah, no, I get it. I know, like I'm conflicted because I absolutely agree with you. I know now that it's who you become in the process. But if you ask my kids, like we'll go on vacation and we're playing beach volleyball, and they're like, "Daddy, you're so intense. What?
You're competitive.
Why do you have to win?" I'm like, winning is fun.
Yes, you're right. It's a fine line, because when I say it, it's because it's both. It's a paradox. Yeah. You have to, it's like you said, it's a fine line. I'm not like, it's okay. It's not about winning.
No,
I
it's
want to
not
win.
Okay. No.
I sure want to win. But at the same time, the juice of it is who I
and especially when you're talking about life goals, it's like, do I want to achieve this goal? Absolutely. Oh, darn, I fell short. But hey, what did I learn along the way? I went to the Olympic Games and I wanted to finish, but I crashed spectacularly. I failed in front of the entire world. But hey, there are so many cool life lessons. In the moment, I didn't see those lessons, but as I'm able to stand back or step back and look at the experience, I'm like, well, there's some cool lessons there that I can, apply to my life, and I can share with others as well.
You had the stamina, you had the scaffolding in that moment to handle that fall on your face in front of the world. You had it. I mean, it felt like, crap in the moment and horrible, but you endured it. You created that endurance of your soul and your spirit to be able to hold that.
Yeah, it's one of those weird situations where in the moment, I know when you watch the video, for example, I'm walking down the breaking stretch and I'm looking, I don't know, all confident perhaps, like I just wanted to exit stage left because I felt like such a failure in front of the entire world in the moment. But afterwards, as I had a chance to reflect on the entire journey, you realize that, wow, that was pretty remarkable. It didn't quite turn out the way I envisioned and wanted, but you know what? We did okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that all of us recognize that in the efforts that we make.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for your time. I would say if you could leave, parents and teachers with 3 things that they can do to kind of nurture the positive mental attitude in children, what would they be?
That's a really good question. And the first thing is love them unconditionally. I think it's really important that kids feel valued, and not for the things that they can perform, not for the results that they can get, not for the A's and the honor rolls and winning the race or the game, but just because they are there. They are a human being. Because it's really important, I think, that all of us want to be loved, and our kids especially want to be loved. That solves so many different issues, right? Because they'll feel good about themselves. They'll have high self-esteem that will really impact the way they perform in school, and in other areas of their lives. I think it reduces the number of kids that end up with emotional issues as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
So I think love them. And in loving them, you encourage them to do their best all the time. And which does not mean baby them. There's a
Right.
difference, right?
Challenging them. There's
Yeah.
always a new
But
level. They never arrive.
precisely, which is my third thing. Challenge them. Don't they will push back, because it's kind of like it's human nature not to want to be challenged and to feel like, hey, what I did was good, and it works, and you have to challenge them to recognize that they can push themselves. And if you challenge them all the time, they eventually get it, because they would have experienced that time when they wanted to stop here, and because you challenge them, they were able to go here, and they go, oh, well, maybe if I could push myself
Yeah.
to get.
Growing hurts. It physically hurts. I know there's a quote, I think it's Toni Morrison, who says, do your eyes light up? She has that poem, when you see your children, or when you look at somebody, does your eyes light up when I enter the room?
Yeah.
And I would say, you talked about unconditional love. Dogs and pets, they're just unconditional. When you walk in the room, they're wagging their tail. They don't judge you. What is unconditional love? It's like, does your tail wag when your kids walk in the room? Like, don't go straight to like, what are you wearing? Did you do your homework? Like, wag your tail first, let them do that. And then, and then go on, challenging them, nurturing them, loving them, all that.
Yeah, I mean, I tell my kids all the time, hey, I make no excuses for holding you to a high standard.
Yeah,
they get it.
Lucky kids.
Sometimes I don't think so. Sometimes I just think I'm weird, because I'm home, I do just like crazy stuff all the time.
Awesome. So for anybody that wants to follow you, are you on Instagram and YouTube, or just Instagram?
Oh yeah, man. Instagram and Twitter, it's at keeponpushing88. At keeponpushing88. YouTube is keep on pushing always. So, and Devon at devonharris.com or www.devonharris.com. Try to make it easy.
Yeah, and I'll add it all in there. And people can book you right now for like keynotes or speaking gigs.
Absolutely. I know we're not flying anywhere, but we can do it virtually. We can come this way. I'm here for you.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for being such a testimony and a living example of what it means to keep on pushing and motivating. And this book right here, I'm not even done with it, but let me tell you what, I already feel like a champion just reading it. You're so full. I mean, every page is just, it's positive. I love it. It's positive. Thank you so much.
Well, you know what? And so when you're done reading it, leave a testimonial.
Oh, I will. I will.
Thank you for that.
I will.
So good.
Thank you so much.
And it's great to be able to hang out with you and with your guests. Thank you. Keep on pushing.
Always.